The first thing I'm going to talk through are custom attributes and tags. I poked around in some of our client accounts and found some of these attributes that I really liked. Size is things that you can track maybe for tabletop decor or things that don't have or a specific measurement isn't necessarily important. The exact measurements on the particular size of some of your bigger items that have to go on a truck might be important to know if you have to, get a 26-foot truck instead of a standard delivery truck. But things like tabletop decor will small, medium, and large help your team identify groupings of items that they can pull and put together so that it's easily more sortable so you don't have so many different measurements. Weight was one that I've talked about before in helping you determine capacity for your truck, for example, where you can take all of the items, weight, and determine that truckload, but also helping determine capacity for things like a chandelier or other components that you may be hanging that require certain rigging, etc. Preferred subrentals is one that I've seen on a lot of accounts that I really like. So how can you upload inventory into Goodshuffle Pro that you frequently rent? Maybe you are more of a tents group, but you consistently rent, white folding chairs from a local provider for those, graduation ceremonies or big galas, that kind of thing. Can you enter that inventory in on the front end, tag those subrentals, include those preferred vendors so that everyone knows exactly where you as an owner want your team to go and order from? Purchase price was another one. This is helpful in determining what your break-even points on inventory items are, right? If I'm purchasing 200 new chairs at $1.25 each, using that in conjunction with the revenue reporting that Goodshuffle Pro will do with you will to help determine those break-even points. Now, custom tags is something I am actually going to jump into my account to show you. And I found a few fun use cases for these. Of course, it's easy to wrap your head around, oh, this makes sense to tag like all of my boho decor together, or maybe all of my modern items, or perhaps my corporate versus not wedding items, that kind of thing. But there's one company in particular who there were things tagged Megan, which was fun. Megan had gone in and tagged her favorite pieces of inventory. So she was able to search those anytime she wants. She knew where to find her favorite items. Now, keep in mind that the tags can help you create custom collections. And this is a great use case for when your clients may be used to seeing a certain category or subcategory that doesn't exist within Goodshuffle Pro. A really good example of this is one of our clients, Savannah Vintage Rentals. She has a category called Garden Stools and Poofs on her website. I can tell you with 100% certainty that that does not exist in Goodshuffle Pro, but she's gone ahead and tagged her applicable inventory here so that when her clients are shopping, this is something that looks very familiar to them. A primary difference between an attribute and a tag is an inventory item can only have one specific attribute. So for instance, the diameter on something. My inventory items can't be 3 inches and also 26 inches. But let's see what comes up for diameter of 3. This telescoping upright can be used for a couple of different uses. Similarly, my power capacities, right? If I have to have a dedicated 20 amp circuit, I can't also run this off of something that I'm sharing with other items. The attributes are singular in that way. So I can only have one attribute characteristic. That doesn't mean I can't have multiple attributes, right? On any of my particular items, I can go in and make sure that I have multiple attributes that I'm tracking, like my fabric, my width, my length, colors, etc. But I can't have multiple linens tagged here. What I could do is I could tag this to multiple collections, right? Perhaps I'm going to make this a part of my traditional collection and part of my wedding collection. So the same inventory item can be used in multiple different collections or tags, which is a great use case for especially things like, if you wanted to do different holidays, things like that. The internal notes, really was pleased to see how many companies are using internal notes. These are pretty straightforward, but I'm happy to take a dive into a couple of different use cases that I noticed. One of the examples that I have screenshotted here, right, are my uplights. This is prompting me to do two things. One, remember to ask the client about their color selection. We can always make that call on site, but it's helpful to know those as much in advance as possible. And this is also reminding me that these are battery powered uplights. So they can only run a maximum of 18 hours. And so I've got to remember to make time to recharge those assets if they're going to be on site for more than a day. These internal notes are really great for anything related to the fulfillment team, because when you're adding internal notes, those are automatically going to show up in the notes section of your fulfillment pages. So when your warehouse users are signed in, they'll be able to see these notes here. This is also good for special instructions on the setup of particular items. A great use case that I saw was also tracking notes on different capacities. Again, and a little bit of a different use case than like power would be, it's a particularly large item. So it has to have at least a 36-inch doorway in order for this item to get in the building. Or perhaps this item weighs 1,000 pounds and we can't haul it upstairs. It has to use an elevator. All of those great reminders that are going to be huge time savers for you in the planning process. The next thing I'm going to cover is the files, which look like something that a couple of you haven't been using yet. And this is a great place right now to do some of the cleanup, to upload any warranty information that you have on these. How much of this information, whether it's warranty information, receipts, assembly instructions, is living in a separate Dropbox account, or maybe it's still in your email and you haven't centralized this to the team. The files is a great place to store this information. You can see, in addition to the warranty information, I've got the receipt from a past purchase. And I also have on this thing what the wiring information is. When all of this is plugged in and everything is in the right place, what does that traditionally look like, right? I don't want to store that necessarily as a photo on the inventory item itself, because that is something that would be client facing. So the finished product of like a tent, meh, that could make sense because the client is going to see that set up. But there are plenty of items I know of that you might want to be very particular with how this item is getting set up, and you don't want to show that level of detail to the client. And so that would be a great place to store those items. Remember that your fulfillment teams, again, have access to this information on every single project that it's related to. So if I go into a particular item here, my files tab is located just right here. Remembering that I'm signed in as a full user in this particular view, which is why why the revenue is showing there, but keeping in mind that that information is hidden from your limited users. Next, touching on accessories, alternatives, and required services. So there's a couple of use cases that I'll go through here. The first one I think is pretty well used by our clients. Accessories, right? Remembering to include a charger when you're bringing a laptop, or any specific cords and cables that you might need, covers and such. Being able to add 2 items or more at one time, right? Relating your cushions to your chairs, or your blowers with your inflatables, stakes with your tents, all of that jazz. Another great use case are the alternatives. And so I think this is helpful in many industries, right? Especially for those AV companies, there's a lot of fixtures that are interchangeable. So by providing alternatives to your fulfillment team, you are already giving them a stamp of approval. If there's a conflict on this particular item, go ahead and swap it out. You can't, we're oversold on the 15-inch MacBook Pros. Feel free to bring a 13-inch instead. This gives your fulfillment team the leeway to know and resolve conflict without having to go external to sub-rent something, obviously saving a few bucks there, but also can make swaps in the back end if those items are hidden from the client's view, and just swap those out and keep going. Also, another example would be things like chairs. Perhaps on a white resin chair, I may offer alternatives like my white shibari chair, or the wood version of the resin chair, which may traditionally be a little bit more expensive. I might traditionally rent that out for an extra $1 or $2. But overall, using and renting the items that I already own is a huge cost savings against having to go and sub-rent items from another vendor. And the sub-rent, the alternatives, that just lives in the same pane as the related items do. So when you're editing a particular item here, you can see when I go into relations, the alternatives is just that next tab over. Another thing worth touching on is, in the similar vein, are those required services, right? So this may be a great use case for like my digital graffiti wall. I have a special cable as an accessory, but you can see here my associated services are, I have special terms and conditions that I want to call out for the use of this. And so I'm going to automatically include those because they have been required. This is also an inventory item that when I send it out, it has to include an attendant. This is not like a giant tic-tac-toe or a giant Jenga where I can drop it off and it's all good. I want to make sure that when my salesperson is quoting this out to a client, they are also including the price of an attendant. This could be a great use case for things that require a special delivery, a bigger truck, or any personnel service or special terms that you want to call out to the client, and make sure that your salespeople are covering that with the clients on the front end. Remember, the digital pull sheet is going to track all interactions. So it's a really powerful tool in the team accountability and helping you identify 3 phases in your fulfillment process. So the default is pulled, prepped, and loaded. For those of you that have done a demo with me, I utilize the all loaded, all dropped off, all picked up, because I know how often I hear from clients, and even in my own experience when I was a planner, how often and how frustrating it was if something didn't make it to the event site because, the team forgot something. Or when I sent the team to get their items, how frustrating it was if something didn't get picked up at the event site. So I really like those 3 phases. Remember that your drivers can have, or crew leads can have, access to this information on the go. So it's easy for them to confirm when things are loaded, dropped off, and picked up. Another use case I saw was reviewed, loaded, and delivered. So there was a bigger team that I had noticed who will send their teams off into the warehouse to pull items to go on the truck. And the crew lead would then review the items as they were being staged and confirm, yep, we've got everything reviewed. And then the driver would confirm when it is loaded on the truck. And then the team would confirm when things were delivered on the event site. That particular team also took photos of the finished setup and added them to the files tab when they were on site. So if an event manager had to leave early, they could still see proof that the event was set up as it needed to be. And then another company that has more geared towards custom fabrication has approved to mark when something has been signed off by the client. Again, I know in my experience that when I was working with custom fabrication companies, yes, we would sign the overall contract, but we could still be working on renderings or ground plans. And so tracking when something is finally approved by the client, and then when something has gone into production, and then of course when it was ready to move, be loaded on. Remember, the digital pull sheet is going to track all interactions. So it's a really powerful tool in the team accountability and helping you identify 3 phases in your fulfillment process. So the default is pulled, prepped, and loaded. For those of you that have done a demo with me, I utilize the all loaded, all dropped off, all picked up, because I know how often I hear from clients, and even in my own experience when I was a planner, how often and how frustrating it was if something didn't make it to the event site because, the team forgot something. Or when I sent the team to get their items, how frustrating it was if something didn't get picked up at the event site. So I really like those 3 phases. Remember that your drivers can have, or crew leads can have, access to this information on the go. So it's easy for them to confirm when things are loaded, dropped off, and picked up. Another use case I saw was reviewed, loaded, and delivered. So there was a bigger team that I had noticed who will send their teams off into the warehouse to pull items to go on the truck. And the crew lead would then review the items as they were being staged and confirm, yep, we've got everything reviewed. And then the driver would confirm when it is loaded on the truck. And then the team would confirm when things were delivered on the event site. That particular team also took photos of the finished setup and added them to the files tab when they were on site. So if an event manager had to leave early, they could still see proof that the event was set up as it needed to be. And then another company that has more geared towards custom fabrication has approved to mark when something has been signed off by the client. Again, I know in my experience that when I was working with custom fabrication companies, yes, we would sign the overall contract, but we could still be working on renderings or ground plans. And so tracking when something is finally approved by the client, and then when something has gone into production, and then of course when it was ready to move, be loaded on the truck. All of these phases are then tracked in the logs tab. So that is something, keep in mind, that your limited users can't see this logs tab. All they would be able to see is the fulfillment and the files tab. So they can interact with this, click when things are loaded, dropped off, and picked up. But your full users and you as account admins will be able to see this on the activity log. And this is not meant to be a big brother, right? This is just meant for some really good team accountability. And the teams who have gone digital have noticed a lot less of that he said, she said, and friction on the team, because the general rule is if it didn't happen in Goodshuffle Pro, then it didn't happen. And so this is really helping you hold your employees accountable. And I think this is a great time to figure out, is going digital something that our team wants to try when things are scaling back up, right? If there are changes that I know happen all the time, the same week of an event, even as things are being loaded and on the truck, right? If my teams are operating off of a tablet or their phone, I'm sending them a message to say, hey, something changed. Don't forget to pull the chairs. They can then confirm that from the digital pull sheet to make sure everything is happening in real time. If I'm operating off of a marker board or just printed copies, that's not always the case. The last thing I'm going to cover is making sure to do, an inventory count and check. Your teams know what columns they need set up on the inventory page, again, to perform those from a tablet here. So this is going to allow me to do an audit of a few things. I can see all in one place here how many I have posted, how many items I have set aside. Remembering, if you want to just check in and resolve all of your set asides, that can be determined here. And then I can see the total that I have in stock. And so that is meant to tell me how many items I should have there. So when the team is doing those inventory counts. And then, of course, we're also able to do an audit of things like the tags. I can easily see here which items are listed on the website wish list and on the marketplace. So for those of you who have the website wish list enabled or are making use of the Goodshuffle Pro marketplace, I know sometimes there are different tools and sandbags and things that, as you've uploaded inventory over the years, might have made it onto one of those two things. So this is a great time to go ahead. I can filter these lists accordingly, right, and make sure that none of the tools and things I don't want people to rent are listed in either of those places. It's a really quick change if I wanted to, for instance, remove my ice. For instance, I'm just going to go in here and then turn these off so neither of them appear. The benefit of the Goodshuffle ecosystem then is, right, that's automatically adjusted on my website and automatically adjusted on my website wish list integration. So I'm not having to make that change in multiple places. And then I can see the date it was created and when it was last updated. So this is allowing me to see okay, has this been checked this quarter, this year, however often you're doing the inventory management and control.